Everybody, I am so excited to have my dear friend back. We had her on last December, I believe it was, in one of the earlier shows. It is Alelia Bundles. She is the biographer of Madam C.J. Walker, the great great granddaughter of the first female millionaire in the country. That's right. And her book, On Her Own Ground, which has been re released under a new name. You probably know it because of the Netflix series, Self Made. I have Alelia Bundles on the line. Alelia, how you doing?
Hey, Michelle, very nice to be with you.
You're looking fabulous as always. You're just timeless. You always look
Thank,
good.
thank you. You're looking fabulous too,
Well,
darling.
thank you. This is pandemic hair. It's all up in a bun. You do what you got to do, right?
Entrepreneurial opportunities for our friends in the beauty business.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And I have my heart goes out to beautypreneurs out there all over the place because so many of them had to either halt their businesses or pivot. And it's really been
Right.
a trying time. So I just want to shout them out before we get going. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
And
And a
certainly,
lot of them are being creative. This is a moment for creativity.
yes,
It's
ma'am.
tough, but you have to dig deep.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And you know what? We're all inspired by your great great grandmother, the Madam C.J. Walker. And you know what? She is going to be the nice segue into our culture soup moment. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. You know what? No matter what the hashtags are out there right now, we know COVID-19 and coronavirus are all over the place. Hashtag boss babe is always trending, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And I think that the self-made Netflix series, I have seen people saying that they are dusting off their side hustles and that they are inspired as they are sitting at home and sometimes worried about what's going to happen next, that they are looking to their entrepreneurial spirit.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And Madam C.J. Walker, such the original boss babe. I had the thrill and privilege to do some work with Mary Kay last year. And as we
Mm.
were unraveling the story of Mary Kay Ash to some entrepreneurs that day, I couldn't help but in my opening remarks say that she inspired me, but she harkened back to the original boss babe, Madam C.J. Walker. They kind of had sort of the same business model, wouldn't you say?
Well, yes. And, one of the things that I learned when I was doing my research is that in 1917, when Madam Walker had her first convention of her sales agents, something that had to have been one of the first group of women, business women getting together, at that convention, she gave prizes like Mary Kay,
Mm.
but 2 years before Mary Kay was born,
Yes.
to the women who sold the most products and brought in the most new agents. But she also gave prizes to the women who had contributed the most to charity.
Mm-hmm.
Part of her message to this army of 200 Black women who had come from all over the United States, the Caribbean, and Central America, she said to them, "Your first duty is to humanity. I want others to look at us and realize that as Walker agents, we care not just about ourselves, but about others." And at the end of the convention, the women sent a telegram to President Woodrow Wilson urging him to support legislation to make lynching a federal crime. So,
Wow.
yes, it was about making your own money, becoming
Yes.
economically independent. But the bigger message was use that money and that influence to make a difference in your community.
Awesome. You know what? You said a magic date in there. And if this is something you don't want to talk about, I will edit it out. But I got to ask you 1917, 1918, the Spanish flu. So Madam
The
Walker
Spanish
had to
flu.
deal with exactly what is going on right now with coronavirus. How did she manage that? Is there anything that gives you any indication of how she kept her business afloat?
One of the reasons that we can tell Madam Walker's story with such detail is that we have almost daily letters between her and her attorney,
Mm.
and between her daughter and her attorney, and business records. I mean, literally tens of thousands of records.
Wow.
So I can tell what she's thinking about. And in 1918, when the flu was happening, when that Spanish flu, misnamed
Mm-hmm.
Spanish flu was
Right.
happening, her family physician, Joseph Ward, lost his son, his infant son.
Oh.
She had a cold, what she described as a cold, throughout the fall of 1918 and into early 1919. And in the letters, it just says, I can't shake this cold. She never mentions that she has the flu. So I
Wow.
don't know that it was the flu, but she was having some health problems. And of course, she was immunocompromised
Mm-hmm.
because she had hypertension and she had kidney issues as a result of hypertension. So I don't know from a documentation standpoint that she actually had the flu, but she did have some kind of cold that she couldn't shake.
Wow. You know what, Alelia? That's almost spooky because there's so many people here in the United States of America before we even knew that it was going to hit our soil. There were people who were sick that didn't know what was going on.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And people who are asymptomatic. I mean,
Yes.
and you think about I've done a lot of research on Black soldiers who went over to Europe during the war in France. And certainly a number of soldiers died of the flu. I haven't seen anything really written about the Black soldiers, but I wonder if they were in a separate, they were separated from the white soldiers, if that
Mm-hmm.
had anything to do with it. I don't know that from a research standpoint.
Yeah. Fascinating. Oh my goodness. So let's talk about how On Your Own Ground, the book that you and I worked to get publicity around, how many years ago? 2003, 2004, something like that, has now been reissued, renamed, rebound, I believe, because there's a new cover to reflect the new Netflix show, Self Made.
Right. So my book, yes, that we worked on long, long ago, On Her Own Ground, The Life and Times of Madam C.J. Walker, originally came out in early 2001,
Mm-hmm.
and then the paperback came out in 2002. And now that there is a Netflix series starring the amazing Octavia
We
Spencer
love her.
called Self Made. Yes, we love her. She was great. Um, the publisher, my publisher, has put together two editions. One is a movie tie-in
Mm-hmm.
edition with Octavia Spencer on the cover named Self Made.
Right.
And the other has a new cover, but the original title, On Her Own Ground.
Oh,
So
wow.
it is essentially the same book
Okay.
as the original from 2001, but I've written a new epilogue and I've made a few corrections. In a 293-page book, there are a few mistakes that you make the first time around.
Sure,
So I have,
sure.
as a journalist, I have made a couple of
This
corrections.
is
And
what
I've
we
done
do.
a ton more research because I'm almost finished with a biography on Madam Walker's daughter, Alelia Walker. It will
I
be out
can't
next year
wait. Oh, I
from
can't
Scribner.
wait. She's so
So there's a
fabulous.
lot. I stuck in a few little things about her that weren't in the first edition.
Hmm. And this would be your grandmother, right?
My great grandmother.
Great grandmother. Okay.
My great
Great
grandmother. So
grandmother.
Madam C.J. Walker, great
Gotcha.
great grandmother, Alelia Walker, my great grandmother, and then Alelia Walker actually adopted my grandmother,
Oh,
my
wow.
grandmother who was May. So May appears at the end of the Netflix series. She goes to Spelman, and so she becomes president of the company, and then my
Wow.
mother, Alelia, and then me. So there are three Alelias.
Wow. Okay, that's how I got it a little crossed up. I knew there was
Right.
more than two.
Right. It's like the three Alelias will throw you
Yes.
off.
Well, you know what, Alelia, number three? You said you did some more research. What did you uncover that you didn't know already?
So this story with Alelia Walker, even when I was writing On Her Own Ground, I was trying to establish the relationship between mother and daughter. And my last chapter, the sort of end of the book, called The Afterward, I tried to put her whole life in the 20s into about 10 pages because I
Mm.
knew I was going to write another book and I
Yeah.
didn't want to give my secrets away.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I discovered is that the way she's been written about in the past essentially is Madam Walker made the money, her daughter Alelia spent the money, she had a lot of parties, the end. And I have to say, nobody is that pathetic.
Right.
So her
And
parties
she
were
was
great.
very well educated and very
Right,
fabulous.
and
Like, that would just be, you know.
but it was a kind of shorthand that even some scholars whose work I really respect, in writing about the Harlem Renaissance, I guess that was just kind of a neat package. Because when you do a cliche, often it's because you're lazy.
Right.
So I
Or it's
think that's kind of
clickbait, original clickbait,
ex-
not for the internet.
not right, exactly. But what I've discovered about her, she truly was a patron of the arts, and she hosted the first um, show for Augusta Savage, the famous
Mm.
black sculptress. She was very close friends with a lot of the musicians and actors of that period because we know Langston Hughes, Countee Cullen, Zora Neale Hurston, even though Zora lied about her age, but by and large, the writers were about a decade and a half younger than Alelia Walker. So her contemporaries were more the actors and the
Hmm.
musicians who really were kind of that first wave of talent for the Harlem Renaissance. So those people were at her parties, performing in her parties, and doing concerts at her homes. So those kinds of things were interesting to me to really place her as a patron of the arts and not just say, some people said, oh, she didn't even read books. But I have her library. So, with her first editions of
Wow.
signed books, but they just put her in a box. And then the other thing that was so fascinating to me is she really was an international traveler.
Mm.
She loved Havana. And in 1921 and 22, she went to Paris, London, Monte Carlo, Rome for the coronation of the Pope,
Wow.
Palestine, Cairo, and then Addis Ababa to meet the Empress of Ethiopia.
Wow. That's
So she was
amazing.
and she went first class on the SS Paris, the
Ooh.
only black woman who was in first class. So it is a really interesting story. Now she's not her mother. It is absolutely true. She's not as driven a businesswoman as her
Yeah.
mother, but she still is quite interesting all on her own.
Well, I can't wait to read it. Now, we got to get back to Madam C.J. Walker and Self Made. First of all, tell me about that experience. What was it like taking your book, working with the likes of a LeBron James and his team, and then an Octavia Spencer, and bringing this story to Hollywood? What was that like?
So I know people think that because LeBron James's name is listed as an executive producer that I know him, but I've never met him and I've never talked to him.
I hear
So
you.
the Springfield people are, we're not BFFs.
There you go.
But that sort of added to
Hmm.
the made it more interesting to people, sort of
Yes,
gave it some cachet.
it did.
But my book had been optioned a couple of times before, and this is kind of a very typical Hollywood story. In the early '80s, Alex Haley wanted to do a miniseries
Hmm.
about Madam Walker, so I did a ton of research for
Oh,
him. That
wow.
he died in 1992 without
Yeah.
having written a book, but that was, in some ways okay because it was like I got to have a great mentor and
I would.
some
You're okay.
doors
Stop. You know
open.
what? That is like Black history. I have to like take that in for a minute. I wonder what his take would have been like.
Well, it was. I think some of it is generational, and this is what I love about doing interviews with you: is that you always say, "Now wait
Yes,
a minute, let
ma'am.
us go back."
You know I'm
Yeah,
an
yeah, and
externalist too.
I love that's what I love about you. So I have the treatment that Alex did for his original idea, and
Wow.
we went so far as to, he had this beautiful farm in Tennessee that Marion Wright Edelman's Children's Defense Fund now owns, and they
Yeah.
use it as a retreat. But we went to his farm with a couple of the Hollywood producers and directors who had been part of Roots, and Reuben Cannon, who had done the casting, who now I think works with Tyler Perry, and a couple of historians who I invited to come. And we talked about how we would develop the story. And, he saw one of the things that was interesting, he saw a composite character, which is something that I would have done for this self-made
Mm.
series that
Mm.
the writer didn't really have in her vision. But to have a composite character who was a good friend and a mentor to Madam Walker when she was still
Yes.
a washerwoman, and the church women at St. Paul
Mm-hmm.
AME Church in St. Louis, the people who gave her that vision that she could be
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
more than an illiterate washerwoman. And the person he saw in that role at the time was Maya Angelou.
Ooh.
So
this is golden.
yeah, so remember he was close to Quincy Jones,
Yeah.
and Oprah Winfrey was part of that mix because they had just done um uh, Color
Color
Purple.
Purple.
And of course, and Oprah Winfrey and Maya Angelou were good friends.
Yes.
So that was part of the mix of people who would have been involved. But of course, now 30 some years has gone by since then. So
Yeah.
some of those people are gone, or some of those people are older. But that was the idea, and it was there was a love story with C.J. Walker that that he was developing, and so
That's
that was an
nice.
interesting.
Yeah.
And there been more of her politics and more of her philanthropy, which
Mm.
I would have loved to have seen. So we did that. But Alex, I did all this research for Alex. I took 9 months off from my job as a producer at NBC and moved to New York for a few months. And there were still some of the elders who were living. I went to 12 different cities and these
Oh,
people,
wow.
some people who had worked for the company. So it was really a very special moment. And some people may remember Stanley Nelson's film $2 in a Dream, like his very first documentary. People know his Miles Davis and
Mm-hmm.
HBCU documentary. Stanley's a MacArthur Fellow. But his very first documentary was $2 in a Dream about Madam Walker, in part because his grandfather was F.B. Ransom, Madam Walker's attorney. So he
Wow.
same elders for his film. And you can see it now on YouTube. He put it up on YouTube a few weeks ago, and there are like more than 400,000 views. So
Okay,
this is
you
where
know what? I
people
have to
get
stop and just
the
say
truth.
this. And I know you guys are
Mhm.
friends, but he has since become my friend.
Oh,
No
good.
other conversation that I've had on this show has fascinated me so much, except for, drumroll please, Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr. Because so much of what you're sharing with me has a lot to do with ancestry, and that's what we talked about, of course. But these Black history figures that are interacting like in real time in these stories is just blowing my mind. And these are the types of stories that Skip shares, you know?
Right. Well, and listen, this is so much the story that I really want to redo. I mean,
Okay.
Octavia Spencer was great
Yes.
in uh, in Self-Made, and I think for me, she really embodied the spirit and the
Mm-hmm.
courage and the tenacity of Madam Walker. But the storylines were really different than what I would have imagined. It sort of
Mm-hmm.
got stuck on that Annie Malone,
Yes,
Addie
the Annie Malone
Monroe,
thing.
imaginary relationship that really didn't happen,
Mm-hmm.
and very little about people like Ida B. Wells, who
Yeah.
Madam Walker knew, and the way that Booker T. Washington was portrayed, and a little bit of W.E.B. Du Bois. I would have developed those relationships a
Yeah.
lot more, and a lot more with the philanthropy, because I think that people don't really know just how amazing those Black folks were in that first generation out of
Yeah.
slavery. And rather than default to two women fighting each other,
Yeah.
I think we could show the amazing things that were going on. And I think that people assume history is boring
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't like it in school.
Right.
But the real dynamics and the drama, all of these famous people, they all didn't get along with each other.
Isn't
Some
that
of
how it
them
is
did.
anyway?
It's how it is. That's real life. But some of them did, and they really lifted each other up. And
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved to have shown that sort of empowering women, empowering each other. So, that's why there has to be me doing another
Sure.
version of this.
Sure. And there's so much more story to tell. So why not? And I've got to ask you again, I'm going to stop you again. You said it was optioned twice before this. So what was the other
The other two,
story?
when Alex died in 1992, I had met his editor, Lisa Drew, who had done Roots.
Mm-hmm.
And Lisa and I had become friends as a result of Alex. And she's the one who signed my book On Her Own Ground to Scribner.
Oh.
So I began working on that book. When it came out, as I was finishing it at the end of 2000, the book was actually optioned by Columbia TriStar
Wow.
for a CBS movie. And that
Oh.
option came back to me because it fell through, which is what happens
It happens a
with a
lot.
lot of, it happens a lot. And then about 5 years later, HBO optioned it. And this was going along well, but there were two writers, and the more senior of the writers actually died.
Oh.
And HBO wasn't willing to go forward. And so then
Hmm.
the option came back to me again.
Okay.
And then we had about a decade of Black movies don't sell overseas, so Hollywood
Oh,
had no interest.
look at that.
And then, right, then Selma, 12 Years a Slave, The
Black
Butler, and
Panther.
Oscar So White happened, and Black Panther. But all of those things happened, and then my phone started ringing again.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was where we were in
Okay, so you know what we need
2016.
option now? We need the story of you getting this movie made. Because that's a movie in and of itself. We need the Alelia Bundles version behind the scenes.
There's definitely some drama. There's definitely drama behind
Well, speaking of
it.
drama, you mentioned Annie Malone. There's some other things about the movie that weren't quite on the menu. You want to talk about that?
Right. Sure. So yeah, so the most obvious thing, the thing that got the biggest firestorm was the Addie Monroe character, who the writers, the head writer, and the showrunners decided was a composite character who was Addie Monroe, because they said, and they've said in interviews, that they wanted to lean into colorism.
Mm.
So even though in real life, Madam Walker and Annie Malone were rivals and competitors, both were, in fact, as you know, very successful businesswomen and philanthropists who, were equals in that sense. And not their conflict had nothing to do with skin color.
Mm-hmm.
And Annie Malone in real life certainly did not follow Madam Walker to Indianapolis. They were both doing their own things with and empowering women. So
Yes.
that upset a lot of people, and I
Mm-hmm.
understand that, because I did not think that was the way to go, but I was overruled.
There you go.
Um, there you go. But that, and that's part of the way things work in
That's
Hollywood. Like
Hollywood.
I feel, yeah, but I think there's so many amazing stories now, so much that's being optioned
Mm-hmm.
about these historical figures who the most of the world doesn't know about. Those of us who read history and, do that kind of research, we're fascinated by it and we know they're fascinating stories, but the rest of the world is like, who are these people?
Yeah.
But these people really paved the way for us. And I think as these stories are being optioned, I'm really trying with my friends who are in Hollywood, who are receptive, and my friends who are historians and journalists, to really try to create a dialogue that changes the dynamic of, you write the book and we want you to go away. We really
Mm-hmm.
don't want to hear from you because you're interfering with our creative
Yeah.
license. And I don't think it has to be that way. I mean,
No.
obviously they're different mediums, but what is it that people who write history and who have all those facts that can never end up in a movie, what is it that we need to understand about translating it to the screen? And what is it that the folks who do the translation could learn from, why it matters if you totally change the history? Yes, you can do composite characters, but if you totally change the history, it's like saying the Confederates won the Civil
Right.
War.
Right.
Know how much backlash came when folks were going to try to do that movie.
Totally.
So,
This reminds me a lot of the back and forth around Hidden Figures and how, the white male character kind of turned out to be a savior of sorts. But even the whole episode, the whole scene around the woman, I think it was Katherine Johnson, going to the bathroom and how right or
right.
wrong that was, and how that little nuance pretty much changed a whole storyline, which kind of made it false and not true.
Right. And not true. And I get that there are some things, in order to make something dramatic for Hollywood, that there's some things that are going to be changed. So you just kind of go, okay, for the greater good.
Right.
But there are things that, that were, for me, troublesome in the movie. I mean, aside from the Annie Malone
Mm-hmm.
thing, that was the thing that most people
Sure.
reacted to. But there were other things for me. Now, I will say, I loved the wigs. I
Mm-hmm.
loved the evolution. I loved seeing really prosperous Black folks, because most people don't know that there were prosperous Black folks in the
Yes.
beginning of the century. I like to see that there's sacrifice that goes along with building a business.
Right.
And so a lot of people related to that and they were inspired by that. But here are a couple of things. The character sweetness. And I
Mm.
know people love Bill Bellamy, but that's not a real character.
Yeah.
And F.B. Ransom, Madam Walker's attorney, was known for being a straight arrow. His daughter said he took an oath as a teenager to never drink, smoke, or gamble.
All right.
And so
Mr.
for
Do
this to
Right.
be, he was, which allowed Madam Walker to be on the road and to be the
Yes.
visionary. And when you're trying to run a business, you got to have somebody you can trust. So he
Mm-hmm.
was totally trustworthy. But to have him betting on the numbers,
Yeah.
and then to have some illegal money, implying that illegal money was necessary for the company to get started, for me that was
Well,
problematic.
that's breaking his character. I mean, like
That's
literally his character.
That's right, literally his character. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then one of the other things that was problematic for me, well, the Esther character was problematic for me because Alelia Walker didn't have a girlfriend named Esther,
Yeah.
and the real conflict was over two boyfriends. So there's
Mm-hmm.
that. But the other piece was the John D. Rockefeller scene.
Mm-hmm.
And so people have said, "Oh, did Madam Walker, visit John D. Rockefeller?" Well, first they didn't really live next door to each other; it was about 5 miles away. But
Mm-hmm.
okay, so I can get that if they had actually known each other. But there were so many Black people who she consulted.
Yeah.
They're the publisher
Yeah.
of the Black newspapers, the leaders of Black organizations. Those are the people whose values were aligned with hers.
Right.
So for me, it was unnecessary to imply that John D. Rockefeller, who wouldn't have had her over, was someone in whom
Yeah.
she could confide.
Wow.
So those things, now that goes way, most people are not going to get in the weeds and not think about those things. But I do think that kind of thing matters
Of
ultimately.
course. And you're the biographer that is just holding the flame no matter what. You've done so this long. Why stop?
Right. Well, and I want people to be entertained. I want a successful movie like anybody. But maybe I just feel like this for the ancestors, that their story is untold.
Yeah.
And we need to know it. And young people, old people, whatever, we don't know our history. And our history has intentionally been erased and marginalized.
You're so right.
So when there's an opportunity to lift those ancestors up, even with their flaws, I don't mind them having flaws. They had flaws.
Right.
But to really tell what were their struggles.
Yeah. So you have done what a lot of writers dream of. First of all, there are plenty of writers that just dream of having a successful book. First of all. Then to take it through the idea of having it optioned 2 or 3 times. And then finally having it land. And then it's a Netflix event, right? Because, I mean, there wasn't too many people on social media that were not talking this up and saying, I've got to watch it. It was a really good premiere, I would say. What advice or tips might you have for writers who are trying to cross that magical chasm from book to movie?
Well, it is a minor miracle. The idea, all of these people who work so hard on this, Octavia Spencer was great.
Mm-hmm.
I loved having Blair Underwood as Madam Walker, as Octavia's love interest.
That's
I mean, really.
wonderful. I mean, if you could have anybody.
Exactly. But it's also true that during the summer when they were filming, he called me to get more information about C.J. Walker, the character he played.
Oh.
So I really admired him for doing his homework and really
Yeah.
putting that kind of care into it. Kevin Carroll, who played F.B. Ransom, was incredible. He's such a great actor. And then the behind the scenes people, the makeup people, the costume people, the director of cinematography, the production manager, were both Black women.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a whole lot of riding on something like this in order to get it to this point. So I
Mm-hmm.
have great admiration and love for the folks who work so hard.
Yeah.
But advice for people,
Yeah.
so you know what? I just put one foot in front of the other. I mean,
Yeah.
that literally, I couldn't have told you that this absolutely would have happened. I just knew that every time something fell through, that I said, okay, well, I'm just going to keep working. I didn't
Yeah.
even think about it as a defeat. I just thought, well, it just didn't work out that time, but I'm still going to do what I'm doing to tell the story. I'm making my speeches. I'm doing my website. I'm getting ready for the next book. I'm, all of
Yeah.
the little things that I just did every single day. And ultimately, somebody found it. The
And
timing was right. The planets aligned.
isn't that so much the pathway and the journey of an entrepreneur?
Right. It is. And you cannot, as you know, because you are a serial
Yes.
entrepreneur, you really can't be defeated. It was like, okay, so I learned something from that,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just going to keep moving on to the next thing. And there's another door that's opened over here. I mean, that's a cliche, I know, but in fact, it is
It's
true.
true.
So I didn't get to do that. So, oh, I see another opportunity here. Let me keep moving.
Yes, ma'am. Put one foot in front of the other, and when you hear no, keep going
Yeah,
and
I
take
mean, no
advantage of
doesn't
the
even,
opportunities that pop up.
right. No doesn't even feel like no to me.
No,
I mean,
it's
and
it's
I
it's
mean,
just
and I,
a pivot.
it's just a pivot. It's like, okay, so why are you not smart enough to get it? What it is I'm saying?
You know that's right, and I heard somebody say this. I don't know who it was. It might have been a contemporary of mine that's an entrepreneur who had advice for other entrepreneurs. Get used to the word no. And you not only have gotten used to it, it's just a part of your whole operation. It propels you.
It absolutely, absolutely, and you just see, there's some things that I've just learned so much from this. Now I have some other things that I'm some other projects I'm getting ready to do. When I finish with this book on Alelia Walker, that's the last book I'm writing that requires the amount of historical research. I mean, and I will say this is kind of Madam Walker's advice: have a product that's really high quality, and
Yes.
always really important to me that my books be reliable and credible. And so I knew I was starting off with a great foundation. So
Mm-hmm.
that was really important to me that I research and write and I rewrite. And so everything that I write has gone through, multiple edits from me. So I start off with that. But now I'm getting ready to do some other things and I'm thinking, okay, so what did I learn from this experience? There were some things that didn't make me happy as I was going through it. But I managed to do my meditations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I managed to do my self care. I managed to see the people who were allies, and I identified when people were not in my corner. But I didn't want to have, knock down, drag out fights with anybody. I just said, okay, I just got to go. I've
Right.
got to pivot. Got to go another way.
Right. That's wonderful. That's good advice too, because you will come up against adversity, and how you take care of yourself during that time will impact the way you respond, because at the end of the day it really is about how you respond.
It totally is. As I was going through some of the most challenging parts of it, I have a really good friend who is like a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And you have friends who are who are in your corner, who are
Yeah.
cheering you on no matter what. And then there's some people who can really give you really good advice and be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some of those folks around me, and that's really, really important. It's like, here's what you need to think about. If you do this, here's the response that you're going to get.
Right. That's awesome. And you mentioned allies. You mentioned people who supported you. I noticed that Rich Dennis was behind this too and promoting it. Anything else? But it was wonderful to see that side of your business kind of come and support the book and the movie.
Yeah, the Sundial folks have been just great. And, now it's the Essence folks with Rich. This is one of the gifts. And every time there were things that I didn't like or challenges. I mean, literally for the last 50 years, there's always, one of the parts about telling Madam Walker's story is that in addition to the wonderful parts and the inspirational parts, there are always some people kind of grabbing at it
Yeah.
or throwing something at it. I mean, so that happens. That's
Yeah.
that's part of life. But one of the great gifts for me has been Rich Dennis's interest in Madam Walker.
Mm-hmm.
And people who know something about him know he came from Liberia to go to college. And he had heard about Madam Walker even before he got to the United States and wondered what had happened to the brand.
Mm.
So the company never went out of business, but my family was not involved after the mid 80s for about 30 years. Another entity owned the trademark. And Rich bought the trademark for Sundial.
Wow.
And that's when he began to develop this new line of products, MCJW, to be in the Sundial family with Shea Moisture and Nubian Heritage.
That is so
So
awesome.
yeah, it's great for me after after the company, after Sundial was sold to Unilever, he created this New Voices Fund, this
Yes.
$100 million venture capital fund, and bought Essence. But one of the other offshoots of that is he created a foundation that now owns Villa Lawaro, Madam Walker's home in Irvington.
I didn't know
That's a
that.
national, yeah, that's a National Historic Landmark. So some of the women who go through the New Voices
Right.
Fund eventually will be able to,
Okay, that
visit the
explains
house.
it.
And
Because I saw some of that storyline about the entrepreneurs that are being funded and that connection, and I didn't know the full story. That's amazing.
so Madam's having a moment. I mean,
Yes.
she's having a
She is
moment.
the ultimate boss babe, then and now.
There you go. There you
Wow.
go.
Oh, Alelia, this is fantastic. I mean, let's go back. Did you when we met in Milwaukee at
Right?
NMBJ at that little
Right?
coffee shop, did you have any
Yep.
idea? Were you just kind of open to the
No,
universe, or are you just saying, I just want to write this book?
I was open to the universe. At that point, I knew that this is part of the one foot in front of the other. I knew that I needed to finish writing the book.
Hmm.
I finished writing the book. I had a great time promoting that book, and then I needed to move on to something else. So I went back to work at ABC.
Yeah.
And I did that for 5 years. But while I was doing that, I was starting to ramp up my speeches on Madam Walker. I was starting to do other things. I was on the board of the Walker Theater Center in Indianapolis, but just little on the vacations here and there. I was just doing little things, planting seeds. But I also knew that I really wanted to write a book about Alelia Walker because I thought her story was as fascinating. But some
Hmm.
of this is just total labor of love,
Yeah.
compelled to tell their story.
Yeah.
That's what was driving me. The ancestors, I knew the ancestors needed their stories told. And so
Hmm.
that became a passion for me.
That's amazing. Oh, Alelia, it's always good to have you. I learn
I
something
always
new every
talk to you.
time.
Well,
Wow.
and I just love seeing that you have been so intentional about what you were going to do.
Yes, ma'am.
And each one of these things, you have planted seeds just like I have. You plant the seeds, and some of them blossom into big, huge
Yes.
trees and big plants. And some of them are little small African
Yes.
violets, and they still are important. So
Yes,
I love
ma'am.
seeing what you are doing.
You know what? I always felt like connecting with you at that very important time when I was kind of thinking about starting an agency, and I got you on board and Valerie Burton on board. By the way, there she is back there, book number 12, I think. Yeah, it's about time. Just seeing everybody blossom is just amazing. But still, I've always believed that the spirit of Madam Walker kind of rubbed off on me just
I
by
love
coming
that.
into contact with you. And this idea of empowering women has just not left me.
Well, and your confidence was so amazing because you remember I did not know I was your first client.
That's
I
right.
thought I, there was like a whole stable of clients, but I feel even, more honored that I was.
Yes. I mean, goodness, I'm honored. Are you kidding me? Like to be able to say this, but you know what? Even before Self-Made and the Netflix and the revamp of the products and everything, that on her own ground has been standing up in one or two of my offices no matter what. In fact, I just found the box from my agency with all my awards and that book is in
Oh,
there because it fueled so much of what we did during that time frame. And I have to tell you, with this second iteration as a serial entrepreneur, that spirit has not left me. In fact, it's probably more powerful now than it was because I can be a fierce advocate as an executive coach for women and a business coach for entrepreneurs. So,
right. And you have lived the things that you saw in that book.
yes, ma'am.
You have come to your own conclusions on
Yes,
those
ma'am.
things.
Yes, ma'am. That's awesome. Everybody, Alelia Bundles, the biographer of On Her Own Ground and now called Self Made. You can also get it as On Her Own Ground. And you know what? Where can people get the book?
So you can order the book on my websites, aleliabundles.com and madamcjwalker.com. And you can get it at your independent bookstore because we want to support them, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and Simon and Schuster. And I will tell folks it will probably come faster if you order it from somebody else because I have now become the fulfillment department, the
Oh,
shipping department, the labeling department. And I go to the post office about every 3 weeks. So on
yeah.
my couch right now, there are 50 books that I have to label. And
Well,
I
you
hope to
need
get to
to
the post
channel
office
Madam
by
Walker
Wednesday.
and get yourself some affiliate workers that can help you move those things.
Listen, as soon as this pandemic is over, I
Oh
am
my
hiring
gosh.
somebody.
I know you are. Wow. What an amazing conversation. Alelia, thank you so much. And where can people follow you on social media?
So I'm at Alelia Bundles on Twitter and Instagram.
Fantastic.
Check me out and sign up for my newsletter at
Oh,
aleliabundles.com.
good, good, good. Sign up for the newsletter, y'all. Thank you so much, Alelia.
Thank you, Michelle.
All right. So before we go, I do IDs with people that I'm just excited about. So that means that all you need to do is look into the camera and say, "Hi, I'm Alelia Bundles. You don't want to miss my conversation with L. Michelle Smith on the Culture Soup podcast this Thursday," or something like that.
Okay. Hi, my name is Alelia Bundles, and you don't want to miss my conversation with L. Michelle Smith on her super.
It's
Let's do that
okay.
again.
You
Sorry.
know what?
All right.
Identify yourself as the biographer, or aren't you an executive producer of the show? Of the show?
No, no, that's a whole
It's a whole
other
other.
thing.
Okay. The official
That kind of
biographer, or whatever you want to call
right.
yourself.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Sure. Hi, I'm Alelia Bundles, and I am Madam C.J. Walker's biographer and great great granddaughter. You don't want to miss my conversation with L. Michelle Smith on Culture Soup. Is it Culture Soup?
The
Culture Soup.
Culture Soup
Not
podcast.
Culture.
Yeah.
Culture Soup podcast.
There you go.
We'll get it.
One more time.
Hi, my name is Alelia Bundles, and I am Madam C.J. Walker's biographer and great great granddaughter. And you don't want to miss my conversation with L. Michelle Smith on the Culture Soup podcast this Thursday. Be there.
Perfect. Yay.
Okay.
Oh, this is awesome. I can't wait to air it.
All right, sweetie. So
Thank you
I
so
look
much.
for the link so I can post it.
Yes, and I will send
right.
you new social graphics too.
Excellent.
Thank you
All right.
so much. Mwah.
All right.
Bye-bye.